President Vladimir Putin. Can they China-proof their ties? After yesterday's border breakthrough, will Prime Minister Modi also meet Chinese President Xi Jinping? Neither side has confirmed or denied. If they meet, it will be their first formal meeting in 5 years. And what's on the BRICS agenda? As the group expands, is it becoming anti-West or an alternative to the West? We'll discuss all of that. In West Asia, Israel has arrested 14 people who were spying for Iran. These are Israelis on Tehran's payroll. We'll bring you their full story. Also looking at why America is infamous for intelligence leaks. Why do they have this leaky setup? Is it by design? How religion is polarizing voters in the US election. Why India is debating its 3-decade-old law that bans sex determination tests for fetuses. How the honeymoon has ended for Bangladesh's interim leader Mohammad Yunus. What's the story of India's biggest IPO? Why have the shares of Hyundai slipped? And are you a serial returner of the goods that you purchase online? Do you know the chain that you trigger every time you press return? All this and more coming up. The headlines first. The International Monetary Fund retains India's GDP growth forecast, keeps it unchanged at 7% for the current fiscal year. But IMF lowers China's growth forecast for this year to 4.8%. Warns that Beijing's property woes could worsen. China's economic growth is expected to slow down further in 2025. Israel says it has uncovered a Hezbollah bunker holding millions of dollars in cash and gold. It claims that the bunker is under a hospital in the southern suburbs of Beirut. Israel has ruled out striking this medical facility, even as the hospital's director has denied these allegations. Ukrainian President Zelensky says peace talks with Russia depend on the outcome of the US presidential election. If Donald Trump wins next month's election, there are fears that Washington's military and financial aid for Kiev could be in jeopardy. Last month, Zelensky met both Trump and Kamala Harris during his visit to the US. Venezuela arrests its former oil minister. He had resigned just days before his arrest. The former minister is accused of links to a firm controlled by the US intelligence services. This comes 3 months after President Nicolas Maduro's disputed re-election, which the US has refused to recognize amid opposition claims of fraud. Turkey's president condemns late preacher Fethullah Gulen and his followers. Recep Tayyip Erdogan calls them traitors and vows to pursue them globally. Just days ago, the influential cleric had died in exile. Erdogan had accused this preacher of masterminding a failed coup in 2016. And China and the Vatican extend the deal on the appointment of bishops for another 4 years. This marks a new stage in improving ties between the two. The Vatican and China's communist leadership do not have formal diplomatic relations. The Vatican recognizes Taiwan, which Beijing claims as its own territory.
कि समस्याओं का समाधान शांतिपूर्ण तरीके से ही होना चाहिए।
Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in Kazan. It's a city in southwestern Russia, right on the banks of the Volga River. He's there to attend the 16th BRICS Summit. It's probably their most important meeting in years because this isn't the old BRICS. It's a bigger, new-look one. But all that's slated for tomorrow. Today was all about the bilaterals. Prime Minister Modi's first meeting was with the host himself, President Vladimir Putin. After that, he met Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian. Their first meeting since he took charge in July. Also right in the middle of a standoff with Israel. Yet all the focus was on the first meeting, the one with Putin. The two leaders had met in early July too. That's when Modi visited Moscow for a bilateral summit. You may remember that controversy. As always, Prime Minister Modi embraced Putin when they met. But the hug did not go down well with the US and Ukraine. Zelensky said that he was disappointed by it. So would Prime Minister Modi change his approach this time? Well, see it for yourself. So no change in gestures. Prime Minister Modi did give his characteristic hug to Putin. In many ways, that sums up India's policy. The West can criticize all it wants, Ukraine can complain all it wants, but India will not abandon its friendship with Russia. Of course, that commitment has limits. For example, India does not support Russia's war in Ukraine. It has repeatedly called for talks. Prime Minister Modi stuck to that position today. He asked Ukraine and Russia to talk things out, even offered to mediate.
एक्सेलेंसी, रूस और यूक्रेन के बीच चल रहे संघर्ष के विषय पर हम लगातार संपर्क में रहे हैं। जैसा मैंने पहले भी कहा है, हमारा मानना है कि समस्याओं का समाधान शांतिपूर्ण तरीके से ही होना चाहिए। शांति और स्थिरता की जल्द से जल्द बहाली का हम पूरी तरह समर्थन करते हैं। हमारे सभी प्रयास मानवता को प्रमुखता देते हैं। आने वाले समय में भी भारत हर संभव सहयोग देने के लिए तैयार है।
So Prime Minister Modi did not sidestep the war. He called for dialogue and peace, which brings us to Putin. India's attendance is a big deal for him. You see, the West is running a campaign to isolate Putin, to make him a pariah. They have tried to recruit India for this campaign, even invited Modi to their exclusive party, the G7. Yet, Prime Minister Modi has flown over to Kazan. It shows that Putin still has friends that he can count on, powerful friends like India. His remarks today reflected that. Putin said that India and Russia share a special relationship. He also cracked a joke about his chemistry with Modi.
Russian-Indian relations are characterized by a special privileged strategic partnership and continue to develop actively. Our foreign ministers are in constant contact. Trade turnover is in good condition. Our relations are so good. I thought you understand everything without translation.
Overall, most boxes were ticked: optics check, chemistry check, and criticism of war check. So at first glance, it's a healthy relationship. But underneath, it's going through a churn. Look at the timeline leading up to this visit. In July, Prime Minister Modi traveled to Moscow, his first trip since the Ukraine war broke out. The next month in August, he visited Kiev. He expressed solidarity with Zelensky. Then in September, he traveled to the US, met Joe Biden at his house in Wilmington. And in October, he is back in Russia. We know that India balances its relations well, but the last 3 months have been a master class, a very difficult and sensitive tightrope walk. In this time, India has projected itself as a peacemaker, even offered to mediate between both sides. But all this war chatter is hiding something else. The trajectory of India-Russia ties. Where is it going? Historically, weapons have been a big part of this relationship. Whether it's fighter jets or guns or missiles, India bought most of its tech from Russia. But that's changing now. Let me show you some data. From 2009 to 2013, Russia made up 76% of India's arms imports. Now look at the last 5 years. Russia made up just 36%. So India is buying fewer weapons from Moscow. It has diversified its sources. Now France, the US and Israel are also selling weapons to India in large numbers. And while the weapons trade has reduced, oil trade has increased. Russia couldn't sell energy to the West, so they sold it to India at discounts. New Delhi is buying 1.9 million barrels per day from Russia. It makes up 40% of India's total supply, the Russian oil. Could this be the future of India-Russia ties, an energy partnership? Well, oil has been used to bind many bilateral relationships, so you cannot rule it out. Having said that, some questions still remain, like what happens after the war? Will India keep buying Russian oil once the discounts disappear, or will Russia resume selling to the West? My point is, India and Russia must chart out a long-term plan, one that is beyond oil and weapons. And they're moving in that direction. Last year, Russia had around $8 billion stuck in India. They could not take this money abroad, nor could they import much from India. But now that amount has halved. Reports say only about $3 to $3.5 billion remain. What happened to the rest then? Russia used it to buy Indian securities and defense products, and it's a good start. You see, political chemistry was never a problem in this relationship. New Delhi and Moscow can read each other well. The problem is keeping the relationship lucrative, especially with China lurking around. Putin and Xi Jinping have declared a no-limits partnership. Their trade is worth $240 billion. Around 90% of that is done via local currencies, not the US dollar. In comparison, India-Russia trade is just $65 billion. And if you remove oil, it's even less. So India needs to China-proof its relationship with Russia. Whether it's diversifying trade or expanding investments or deepening strategic cooperation, because you cannot sustain a relationship on nostalgia alone. You need concrete gains on both sides. The other big highlight of the BRICS Summit will be Prime Minister Modi coming face-to-face with Xi Jinping, the Chinese leader. Their teams have just struck a border deal after 4 years of standoff. We told you about it yesterday, the India-China thaw. And now Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping are in Kazan. So you can imagine there's intense speculation. Will the two leaders meet on the sidelines? It is likely, although there's no confirmation, given how sensitive the equation is. But this could be the perfect opportunity to attempt another reset. Yesterday, India announced the border agreement. Today, China confirmed it.
In recent times, China and India have maintained close communication on relevant issues on the China-India border through diplomatic and military channels. At present, the two sides have reached a solution to the relevant issues, which China has positively evaluated. In the next step, China will work with India to implement the above solution.
So will the leaders meet? If they do, it would be significant. Their first meeting in 5 years. In the last 5 years, they've had brief interactions, but no substantive meeting. The last one happened in 2019 when Prime Minister Modi hosted President Xi. After that, all high-level engagements came to a grinding halt. And we all know why. In the middle of the Wuhan virus pandemic, China provoked India at the border in the summer of 2020. The standoff continued for years with tens of thousands of troops deployed on both sides of the border. After 52 rounds of military and diplomatic talks, a deal was announced yesterday, right before Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping touched down in Kazan. Obviously, it fueled speculation. Was this to set the stage for a meeting between the two leaders? Both sides are tight-lipped, not just about a possible meeting, but also about the details of the border agreement. What really does it entail? What happens to the troops at the border? Will the numbers go down? What kind of timelines have they agreed on? When will China disengage? As we wait for these answers, here's what we can tell you. This deal has two broad elements. The first one addresses the two flashpoints in Ladakh, Depsang Plains and Demchok. Indian and Chinese troops will be able to patrol these areas, and this is a major breakthrough. The dispute over Depsang and Demchok is an old one. It predates the 2020 border standoff. China has been trying to block Indian patrols in these areas. Now, with this agreement, clear rules should be put in place, will be put in place, as we understand. Reports say for each patrol, there will be at least 14 to 15 troops. And India and China will share their patrol plans in advance with each other. And this is to prevent any clashes. That's the first part of the deal. The second element is disengagement, a gradual reduction of troops along the border. It could be on the cards. India and China share a 3,488-kilometer long border. This border has not been demarcated. It is called the Line of Actual Control, LAC. Right now, like we said, there are tens of thousands of troops on either side. The goal is to reduce these numbers. But how will they do it? India's army chief has weighed in. That's General Upendra Dwivedi. He says restoring trust is the biggest challenge.
We want to go back to the status quo of April 2020. Point number one. Thereafter, we will be looking at disengagement, de-escalation, normal management of line of actual control. It has been our stance from April 20 itself when General Y.K. Joshi was the army commander. As of now, what has happened? We are trying to restore the trust.
Disengagement followed by de-escalation and finally a normal management of the border. That's the plan. It's going to be easier said than done given China's history. So don't expect normalcy in relations overnight. Having said that, these developments are certainly positive. India should be cautiously optimistic. A relatively stable border opens doors to more opportunities, more bilateral talks, greater trade and investment, the resumption of direct flights. The possibilities are indeed immense. But like I said, New Delhi must remain cautious because we've been here before. when China agrees to ease tensions, only to backtrack and backstab later. It happened last year. Both leaders were in South Africa. Again, the occasion was the BRICS Summit. South Africa hosted it last year. Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi did not have a formal interaction. They had a brief and informal chat. They discussed the need to stabilize bilateral ties. Before that, they met in Bali in 2022. This too was an informal interaction when China claimed that both leaders had reached, and the term they used was an important consensus. That's what the Chinese side said. They said they wanted to work with India and bring the relationship back to normal. But Beijing did not walk the talk on resolving the border standoff, so ties did not improve. Even before the Galwan clash, China has made fake promises. In 2018, there was talk of the Wuhan consensus. Prime Minister Modi had travelled to China in 2018. He visited Wuhan, where Xi Jinping hosted him for an informal summit. Then in 2019, Xi Jinping made a return visit. The Indian Prime Minister hosted him in the coastal town of Mamallapuram in the southern state of Tamil Nadu, where India and China held their second informal summit. And in this meeting, China said, and I'm quoting, a new set of consensus and guiding principles would steer ties. But these were hollow words, because 1 year later, India had to mobilize its troops against a huge deployment of Chinese forces. India faced unprovoked attacks and repeated incursion attempts. Now the year is 2024. The dragon with a forked tongue is promising disengagement again. India should keep talking and pushing for peace, but it should not stop preparing for war. With neighbors like China, India cannot afford to lower its guard on the border, and it must insist on real, verifiable action on the ground. Without that, any consensus is meaningless. So the BRICS Summit is underway in Kazan, and this is the 16th edition. The leaders first met in the year 2009, right after the 2008 financial crisis. At that time, the BRICS was called the future of a globalized economy. 16 years later, what does this group really stand for? Is it anti-West? Is it an alternative to the West? Let's look at the group first. BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, BRICS. So the name is an acronym. In 2006, it started with 4 members. South Africa joined in 2010. And this year, 5 new members have joined. Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. They've all joined BRICS this year. So now there's a total of 10 members and there is potential for more.
As of today, 30 countries expressed their desire to cooperate with BRICS in varying degrees, to join this organization's activity in this or that way. Here, together with other members of the organization, we have to think carefully how to treat the enlargement of BRICS. Certainly, we will not push anyone away. It is absolutely clear that our doors are open.
So who all are in Kazan? Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is there, Chinese President Xi Jinping, South Africa's Cyril Ramaphosa. They're all there, so are the leaders of the new member nations. The only person missing is Lula da Silva, the president of Brazil. He hurt his head in an accident, so he was advised to avoid long-distance flights. Instead, Brazil's foreign minister is attending this summit. Beyond that, a dozen other leaders are attending, including Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. So clearly the BRICS is expanding, and so is its influence. Look at the numbers now. 3.5 billion people live in BRICS nations. That's 45% of the global population. Their combined GDP exceeds $60 trillion. That's 37% of the global economy. In fact, it surpassed that of the G7. The BRICS controls 20% of the world's exports. With the induction of oil-rich nations, it also produces 44% of the world's crude oil. So the BRICS is a force to reckon with. But what is its purpose? It's a question the group has long struggled with. The initial idea was cooperation to take on a US-led financial system. So the BRICS set up its own institutions. It rallied for reforms. The idea was to create alternatives to promote a multipolar world. But as years passed, cracks emerged in this vision. Look at the 5 main members. All of them have different interests, different priorities, often clashing interests. Let's start with this year's host. That's Russia. They're at war with Ukraine. The West has isolated Russia. It's heavily sanctioned. the BRICS offers them some relief, an alternative network for diplomacy, trade and investment. So Moscow's position is simple. It sees the BRICS as a way to oppose the West, a way to challenge the Western order. Then you have China. It wants to dethrone the West, position itself as a global leader. And what better way than this? A group that caters to the global South. So this is where Russia and China find common ground, an alliance against the West. That's what they want BRICS to be. But not everyone shares this vision, like India. India does not want to take an anti-Western stand. India believes in balancing ties. It has a historical relationship with Russia. It has a growing partnership with America. New Delhi wants to preserve both. The other two members, Brazil and South Africa, share similar concerns. They want global influence, but they don't want to fight the West. So you see the problem here. Russia and China have a political motive to use BRICS to undermine the Western global order. India wants something bigger, a multipolar world order. The clash of priorities is evident. It makes BRICS a divided bloc. So what's the way forward? Well, their leaders meet every year. The bloc is adding new countries. In Kazan, the mood is optimistic. Member countries believe it still has potential. But to live up to that, they must find a way to overcome their differences, a way to forge consensus. No country should be allowed to hijack the platform. To succeed, BRICS needs to go back to its roots. It began as an alternative to the Western global order, to the Western order of global governance too, and it must stick to that goal. Our next story is from West Asia. The US has sent Secretary of State Antony Blinken to the region again. He landed in Israel earlier today. This is his 11th visit to West Asia in 1 year, and a fresh attempt to bring about a ceasefire. The US thinks the time is ripe. Israel has killed Yahya Sinwar. This could work as an exit ramp and allow Israel to end the war on a high. That's what Washington is banking on. But even if the direct fighting comes to an end, it won't stop the battle behind the scenes. Covert warfare is rife in West Asia, and it's not just the Israeli spy agencies like Mossad. Iran has also made some moves, which Israel is just uncovering. Yesterday, Israel announced that it had arrested 7 Iranian spies. Today, it claims to have arrested 7 more. We'll start with the first group. They were based in northern Israel, in the city of Haifa. They were Jewish people from Azerbaijan who got Israeli citizenship. The 7 included 2 minors and a soldier who had deserted the army. Israel says that they had conducted about 600 spying missions between them over the span of 2 years. So they began working before the October 7th attacks last year. This group was apparently tasked with gathering information, photos of sensitive sites like the Ramat David Air Base, the Nevatim Air Base, the Golani Brigade Base, and the Glilot Base in Tel Aviv. You know what all these places have in common? They've all been targeted recently by Iran or Hezbollah. Iran targeted the Nevatim base directly during its 2 missile barrages at Israel on April 13th and October 1st. Hezbollah fired rockets at the Ramat David base on October 5th. A few days later, they targeted the Golani Brigade base. Hezbollah sent drones there. At least 4 Israeli soldiers were killed in that attack. And earlier today, Hezbollah struck the Glilot base. So Israel's enemies clearly know about these bases. They know what to strike. How did they find out? Israel says it's because of the spies. 2 Iranian intelligence agents were allegedly directing this operation. They were known as Al-Khan and Orkhan. The Iranians approached the 7 spies through a Turkish intermediary. The middlemen supplied them with materials and missions. The spies were given a price list. Basic low-risk missions fetched them smaller sums of money. They started out with those. The spies were paid in cryptocurrencies and sometimes in cash, delivered by Russian couriers. The spies apparently took on riskier missions over time, chasing bigger payouts, and that's how they were caught. 3 of the spies were reportedly following an Israeli official. They were planning to assassinate him, but they were caught before they could do that. And these 3 eventually gave up the rest of the crew. All 7 were officially arrested yesterday, and that was the first group of spies. The second group was arrested earlier today. Again, 7 people. This group is young, reportedly between 17 to 23 years of age. Their leader was of Arab descent. This group also started out with smaller test missions, like setting cars on fire or buying weapons. Each successful mission got them a payout. Again, the more dangerous the mission, the higher the reward. This group is accused of trying to assassinate an Israeli nuclear scientist. They were picked up before they could do that. They were detained, in fact, in September and formally arrested today. Now, both the spy groups are facing trial. They have been charged with aiding the enemy during wartime and conspiracy to commit terrorist offenses. They could face the death penalty or, at the very least, lose their Israeli citizenship. So, by the looks of it, Iran has been learning from Israel. Tehran is also recruiting intelligence assets and conducting long-term operations. So, a ceasefire, which is a very long shot at the moment, may stop the bombardment, and we do hope it does, but the shadow war will rage on. Let's turn to the US now, where the White House is searching for a leak. Not the plumbing kind. This is an intelligence leak. We told you about it yesterday. A pro-Iranian source released secret US documents on Friday. And what do they show? Israel's battle plans, how they're preparing to attack Iran, what weapons they will use, and what the targets could be. Reports say it was leaked by some in the US government. In public, the White House is furious. They want to plug this leak.
We're deeply concerned, and the president remains deeply concerned about any leakage of classified information into the public domain. That is not supposed to happen, and it's unacceptable when it does. So he's deeply concerned about that.
Not everyone buys that, though. Some experts say the US leaked this document on purpose. Why would they do that? Perhaps to build pressure on Israel, or maybe to give Iran a heads up. And it's not unprecedented. The US government is notorious for its leaks. Barely anything stays in the system. It inevitably ends up on American media platforms, and it's not a recent problem either. Let me take you back to 1794. 1794, the US and Britain signed a bilateral treaty. The idea was to settle outstanding issues from America's independence. But a US senator had other plans. He leaked details of this treaty to the public, especially the concessions made by American officials. As a result, the treaty became unpopular. It barely managed to pass the Senate. Now, this episode tells you a couple of things. One, Washington's leak culture is very old. Some people call it a way of life in the US Capitol. And two, the culprit is often within. Most leaks are not the result of investigative journalism. They are voluntarily revealed by officials. Consider last year's Pentagon leaks. US intelligence on Ukraine, Israel, and South Korea was leaked. And the source? A 21-year-old working in the National Guard. Or the 2010 WikiLeaks. The source was a US soldier and analyst. He shared thousands of documents with WikiLeaks. Now, these were meant to sabotage the US government, to expose Washington, maybe because of a sudden conscience check or maybe some policy differences. But these are lone wolf leaks. They're done by a single government official. Sometimes the government itself is the leak. Like the Plame affair of 2003. Valerie Plame was a secret agent of the CIA. Her own government revealed her identity to the media. They basically blew her cover on purpose. Do you know why? Because her husband opposed the US war in Iraq. And that's a key part of leaks. It's not always about the greater good or accountability or even conscience. Sometimes it's about settling scores. Maybe a senator has an axe to grind with the president. Then the senator's office can leak something against the White House. So the motive is never the same. Which brings us to the logistics. How does a wannabe leak get access to secret intel in America? Because the pool is quite large. Around 23 million Americans work for the government. That's federal plus state plus local, 23 million in all. Many of them have security clearances, meaning the right to see secret intel documents. Look at this report from 2014. Back then, 5.1 million Americans had security clearance. That's 1.5% of their total population. Most of them have immediate access to confidential data. Do you see the problem here? Too many people have access to secrets, which means more chances of a leak. Another issue is storage. The US government classifies more than 50 million documents every year. These are sometimes printed, sometimes shuttled between agencies, and sometimes misplaced. Consider what happened to Donald Trump and Joe Biden. When Trump left office, his team packed away secret documents. Some of them were later found in his Florida mansion, that too inside a bathroom. Biden had a similar experience. Classified files were found at his basement in Delaware. Again, a case of ignorance. So what is the US government doing to stop this? Well, in 2011, they set up a task force. The plan was to crack down on leaks in the government. Even the laws are quite strict. Some leaks have faced up to 15 years in jail. Some are still absconding from the US, like Edward Snowden, who is holed up in Russia. Yet the leak culture is not ending. American media says it's not our job to protect secrets. It is the government's job. But the US government appears too big and too careless. The world may not care about domestic US leaks, but when it concerns other countries, when it involves other countries, it may be a problem. Like Israel is not happy about the latest leak. It endangers their strike on Iran. So the White House needs to get a grip on its people, because these leaks are not just political gossip, they have real world consequences.
We want to shift our attention now to how the Indian Airlines continue to grapple with a wave of bomb hoax threats for the 6th consecutive day today, disrupting flight schedules and causing a lot of inconvenience during this busy festive travel season. Today, 20 flights of Air India, Vistara, Indigo have received hoax calls over the last 24 hours. In fact, Civil Aviation Minister Ram Mohan Naidu has said that the ministry is looking at an amendment to the Suppression of Unlawful Acts Against Safety of Civil Aviation Act to enable law enforcement agencies to invoke this law against people who make these hoax bomb threats about aircrafts at the airport. Now, he also said that the ministry was in the process of amending the rules to put people who are caught for making these calls on the no-fly list. That big announcement came in from the Civil Aviation Minister yesterday. We listen in first up.
Since the first day when it has been happening, and this is a process that we follow every time. Whenever there is a bomb threat case happening, or if it is through a call, or if it is through social media, or if it is through some other means, we have a strict protocol that we follow. Because for us, like I said, safety and security is the foremost aspect, and this we follow through the international guidelines itself. We have had multiple meetings. In the last 1 week, I have chaired certain meetings with all the necessary stakeholders within the ministry, and from the ministry we have thought of some legislative action also if it is required, which direction should be moved in. And we have come to the conclusion that there are two areas that we can explore. One.
All right, let's quickly go across to our guest joining us this afternoon. This is aviation expert Sanjay Lazar joining us on the broadcast. Mr. Sanjay, appreciate you taking out your time. Thank you for speaking to us here on CNN News 18. Mr. Sanjay, if you can put in perspective, all that you've heard and seen so far. Over 70 plus flights have received these hoax bomb threats in just the last 2 weeks. That's become a daily affair and causing a lot of nuisance, not just to the passengers. Of course, they're at the receiving end of a lot of inconvenience, delay, so on and so forth. Makes it worse in an emergency situation, but also for the airlines. The operational costs also keep getting added up. So tell us a little bit about what you make of this entire menace that keeps coming to the fore on a daily basis now.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you for having me on your show. It's the 7th day, if I'm not mistaken, and to my count, I think we've already crossed 100. I maybe give or take a couple here. If you're saying we've had more than 20 today, it's highlighted a lot of things. Right from day one, a week ago, I've been on various media, and whether it's social media or writing or speaking on TV, that I think we've lacked a proactive response. The Ministry of Home Affairs should have been involved instantly. We kept dibbling, dabbling, and then, of course, we, got lost. We said first it was pranksters, then we said, maybe somebody from inside. Now we find that they're being spoofed and the VPNs are coming from Germany and the UK. This is something more serious. This is a very concerted effort to undermine India, its security, and make a fool of our cyber security premises, our aviation security. I do believe that given the multiplicity of agencies, and this is what I've said consistently over a week, you've got the Ministry of Home Affairs, you've got the Ministry of External Affairs involved, you've got the DIT, you've got the MOCA, that's the civil aviation, you've got the DGCA, the BCAS, the CISF, a number of, we should have had a national federal agency like CBI or NIA or NSA, so, looking into this, or IB or RAW, under the Ministry of Home Affairs. And we should have had a...
For our next story, let's go back in history again. The year was 1980. Ronald Reagan was in Detroit, standing in front of a huge crowd. He was there to accept the nomination for the Republican Party, but Reagan did something unusual. He ended his speech with 3 words: God bless America. It may not sound strange now. We hear US presidents say it all the time. But before Ronald Reagan did it, no one else had. US leaders were expected to keep their faith to themselves. Well, not anymore. Religion now plays a crucial role in American politics. But this presidential election, it took a backseat. The candidates barely talked about faith. They did not clash on religious lines. That changed on Sunday. Kamala Harris kicked off her 60th birthday by visiting 2 churches in Georgia. So Kamala Harris attended a service. The congregation sang to her. She spoke about her childhood experiences, especially attending a black church.
In this moment, our country is at a crossroads, and where we go from here is up to us, as Americans and as people of faith. And now we ask a question. We face this question: what kind of country do we want to live in? A country of chaos, fear, and hate, or a country of freedom, compassion, and justice?
Kamala Harris is a Baptist. That's a branch of Christianity. She was raised by a black Anglican father, and her mother was an Indian Hindu, so her religious journey was complex, but faith has long played a role in her life. She's a member of a Baptist church. She spoke at a National Baptist Convention. In the last decade, Harris has downplayed the role of religion in her life, but now she seems to be embracing it again. Her opponent, Donald Trump, though, is not buying it. He says she is destructive to religion.
She's very destructive to religion. She's very destructive to Christianity and very destructive to evangelicals and to the Catholic Church. And she is, let me put it this way, Ben, she is your worst nightmare. Much worse than Biden, and he wasn't so hot.
Trump isn't overtly religious himself. He rarely attends services. He hardly talks about faith. But he has secured overwhelming support from evangelical Christians. Do you know why? Because of their shared political agenda. It's a marriage of convenience. Which brings us to religion itself. How does it influence US politics? Well, America was founded on the principles of religious freedom, a separation of church and state. But religion has always been a subtle undercurrent in elections. It has long shaped voter behavior. Historically, most US presidents have been Protestant Christians. But in 1960, that changed. John F. Kennedy became the first Catholic presidential candidate. It sparked an uproar. His candidacy faced a huge opposition. Many believed that his Catholic faith would make him more loyal to the Pope than to America. JFK rallied against these rumors. He advocated for religious freedom, and that helped him win the elections. In the 1980s, evangelical Christians emerged as a powerful political force, especially in the Bible Belt, which is mostly southern and Midwestern states. This group is a bedrock of the Republican voter base, and it propelled a lot of leaders into power, including George W. Bush. He appealed to voters through his evangelical credentials. So white evangelicals are crucial, but so are black Protestant voters. They are a key voting bloc for Democrats. Many of them voted Barack Obama in 2008. So religion basically dominates US politics and US elections, and more often than not, it is a defining factor. Take abortion, for example. It's a big flashpoint in this election. It also divides votes along religious lines. Catholic and evangelical Christians support candidates who are pro-life, meaning anti-abortion. Now look at Joe Biden. He is the second Catholic president in American history. He openly discusses his faith. Yet his political position on abortion lost him Catholic voters. Religious endorsements also carry significant weight. They can help sway undecided voters. But how much of it matters now in today's America? Look at this data. In 2007, 16% Americans identified as atheists. In 2024, 28% are religiously unaffiliated. That's almost double. Despite this trend, religion remains a polarizing factor in American politics. You cannot discount its role, especially in an election as close as this one. And now let's turn our attention to India. 3 decades ago, India outlawed sex determination tests. Couples were not allowed to determine the sex of their fetus because female fetuses were often aborted as families preferred a male child. This led to a gender imbalance. To fix it, such tests were banned in 1994. But now India's top medical body says that sex determination tests should be legalized. The chief of the Indian Medical Association says the ban has failed. It hasn't improved India's gender ratio. It has only led to the harassment of doctors. And this, of course, has triggered a debate. Should India revisit the ban? Which other countries prohibit such tests and why? Here's a report.
A new debate has stirred in India, a debate over sex determination tests. These are prenatal tests. They help parents determine the sex of the fetus. They were outlawed in India in 1994 to curb the practice of sex selection and ensure better gender balance. The Preconception and Prenatal Diagnostic Techniques Act was passed, and for years, this legislation has banned sex determination tests in India. But time and again, it has faced opposition, sometimes by politicians, other times by doctors, and we are seeing this right now. This is Dr. R.V. Ashokan, President of the Indian Medical Association, India's top medical body. And he has created a stir. He says that sex determination tests should be legal in India. Why? Because they don't help. That's what Ashokan is saying. The sex determination tests have not improved India's gender ratio over the past 3 decades, so they should be scrapped. Now, data-wise, Ashokan is not completely wrong. In 1981, India had 934 females per 1,000 males. In 1991, the number dropped to 927. 3 years later, sex determination was outlawed. In 2001, we could see slight improvement, 933. About a decade later, the number jumped to 943. That's a solid rise from 927 to 943 in about a decade. 2011 was the last census year. Now, according to another government survey, the National Family Health Survey, as of last year, the ratio stands at 1,020 females per 1,000 males. So, from 927 in 1991, the number of females has exceeded the number of males. And while it may not be a huge jump, it is progress, thanks to laws like the one that bans sex determination. Historically, gender imbalance in India has mainly been due to female feticide and infanticide. Even now, there are clandestine operations. A nexus of medical practitioners who determine sex despite the law, and families who kill the girl child. So, who is to blame here? It's the lack of awareness, the dilution of the sex determination law, not the law itself. which, if anything, acts as the first line of defense against female feticide. And not just in India but across the world, like in the UK, but mostly across Asia, including Vietnam, Nepal and China. Research says that banning sex determination helps. In many countries, the number of males and females are roughly the same. On average, male births are slightly higher, usually 105 boys for every 100 girls. But for some countries, this number is much higher than normal, sometimes 130 boys to 100 girls. This is observed in countries where there's a cultural preference for sons and where there is access to sex determination technology. As a result, 100 million girls are said to be missing from Asia. The sex determination ban seeks to undo decades' worth of damage. Removing it now will wipe out the progress we have made so far.
Let's turn to Bangladesh now, where the honeymoon is over for Mohammad Yunus. Every leader has that phase. They're newly elected, the people love them, the global community is curious, and they can do no wrong. But Yunus's honeymoon appears to have ended. He's facing tough questions at home. First, from the president of Bangladesh. His name is Mohammad Shahabuddin. Last week, he talked to journalists about the events of August, about when Sheikh Hasina fled Dhaka. Soon the conversation turned to her resignation letter. Did she even draft one? And if so, was it handed over to the president? Listen to what he said.
There was no news anywhere. At one point, I heard that Sheikh Hasina had left the country without informing me. I am telling you the truth as it is. When everything was under control, one day, the cabinet secretary came to collect a copy of the resignation letter. I told him I was also looking for it.
The president did not get a resignation letter. He says there is no documentary evidence of Sheikh Hasina stepping down. Now, just to be clear, the president is not saying that Sheikh Hasina is still the Prime Minister of Bangladesh. He says that chapter is closed. But the narrative is problematic because Hasina's son has often said the very same thing, that she never resigned, that legally she is still Bangladesh's Prime Minister. That's what the son says. Of course, the interim government is having none of it. They say the president is lying, that he's violating his oath of office. The law minister even suggested removing the president. Now, just to be clear, Sheikh Hasina fled Dhaka on an airplane. If that wasn't a resignation, I don't know what is. So the president is really clutching at straws. But the Yunus regime is not doing any better. They toppled the prime minister. They made the chief justice resign, and now they're targeting the president of the country. At this rate, no one will be left to rule. It is the classic sign of an insecure government. In this case, also an unelected one. You see, Bangladesh does not have the provision for an interim government. Legally, it is not a thing in Dhaka, an interim government. So Yunus is basically running an ad hoc regime. He's handling things as they come. But the political parties in Bangladesh are not happy, especially the BNP, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party. They are questioning the delay in holding elections. Now, Yunus keeps talking about reforms, but he's silent on the most important one, democracy. When will Bangladesh vote again? The interim government has set out some conditions like reforming the election commission, updating the voter list and implementing political reform. Elections will only be held after that. Do you see the problem here? What if these reforms take 2 years to complete? Will Yunus cling on to power till then? Looks like he will. And he's got the military support as well. The army chief says democracy must return within 18 months. That's 1.5 years. It's a long term for an interim government, especially in a country like Bangladesh. Remember, this is not some failed state with a power vacuum. Bangladesh has institutions. Bangladesh has political parties. So the delay is quite surprising. Plus, who knows what Bangladesh will look like after 18 months, especially if hardliners have their way. I'm talking about the likes of Jamaat-e-Islami. Some of their leaders are pushing crazy plans like changing the name of Bangladesh and replacing the national anthem of the country. They want to completely alter the Bangladeshi identity. In these extreme cases, Yunus pushed back, but elsewhere he's playing along. Last week, he cancelled 8 national holidays. All of them were introduced by Sheikh Hasina. Among them, 2-day standout. March 7th, which is Mujibur Rahman's birthday. and August 15th, his death anniversary. As you know, Mujibur Rahman is Bangladesh's founding father. He led the country's liberation movement, and yes, he is also Sheikh Hasina's father. But does that justify erasing his legacy? His contribution to Bangladesh? Surely not. Even Bangladesh's recent economic rise was steered by Sheikh Hasina. Will Mohammad Yunus destroy that legacy too? Will he abandon the garment factories and shops? I hope he doesn't, because Bangladesh needs to look ahead. It needs to fix problems in the present, not look for ghosts from the past.
We want to shift our attention now to how the Indian Airlines continue to grapple with a wave of bomb hoax threats for the sixth consecutive day today, disrupting flight schedules and causing a lot of inconvenience during this busy festive travel season. Today, 20 flights of Air India, Vistara, Indigo have received hoax calls over the last 24 hours. In fact, Civil Aviation Minister Ram Mohan Naidu has said that the ministry is looking at an amendment to the Suppression of Unlawful Acts Against Safety of Civil Aviation Act to enable law enforcement agencies to invoke this law against people who make these hoax bomb threats about aircrafts at the airport. Now, he also said that the ministry was in the process of amending the rules to put people who are caught for making these calls on the no-fly list. That big announcement came in from the Civil Aviation Minister yesterday. We listen in first up.
Since the first day when it has been happening, and this is a process that we follow every time. Whenever there is a bomb threat case happening, or if it is through a call, or if it is through social media, or if it is through some other means, we have a strict protocol that we follow. Because for us, like I said, safety and security is the foremost aspect, and this we follow through the international guidelines itself. We have had multiple meetings. In the last 1 week, I have chaired certain meetings with all the necessary stakeholders within the ministry, and from the ministry we have thought of some legislative action also if it is required, which direction should be moved in. And we have come to the conclusion that there are two areas that we can explore. One.
All right, let's quickly go across to our guest joining us this afternoon. This is aviation expert Sanjay Lazar joining us on the broadcast. Mr. Sanjay, appreciate you taking out your time. Thank you for speaking to us here on CNN News 18. Mr. Sanjay, if you can put in perspective, all that you've heard and seen so far. Over 70 plus flights have received these hoax bomb threats in just the last 2 weeks. That's become a daily affair and causing a lot of nuisance, not just to the passengers. Of course, they're at the receiving end of a lot of inconvenience, delay, so on and so forth. Makes it worse in an emergency situation. But also for the airlines, the operational costs also keep getting added up. So tell us a little bit about what you make of this entire menace that keeps coming to the fore on a daily basis now.
Thank you, Crispin. Thank you for having me on your show. It's the 7th day, if I'm not mistaken, and to my count, I think we've already crossed 100. I maybe give or take a couple here. If you're saying we've had more than 20 today, it's highlighted a lot of things. Right from day one, a week ago, I've been on various media, and whether it's social media or writing or speaking on TV, that I think we've lacked a proactive response. The Ministry of Home Affairs should have been involved instantly. We kept dibbling-dabbling, and then, of course, we, got lost. We said first it was pranksters, then we said, maybe somebody from inside. Now we find that they're being spoofed, and the VPNs are coming from Germany and the UK. This is something more serious. This is a very concerted effort to undermine India, its security, and make a fool of our cyber security premises, our aviation security. I do believe that given the multiplicity of agencies, and this is what I've said consistently over a week, you've got the Ministry of Home Affairs, you've got the Ministry of External Affairs involved, you've got the DIT, you've got the MOCA, that's the civil aviation, you've got the DGCA, the BCAS, the CISF, a number of we should have had a national federal agency like CBI or NIA or NSA, so looking into this, or IB or RAW, under the Ministry of Home Affairs, and we should have had a team. or the military intelligence. Any one of these agencies would have worked concertedly. Now, I think they're getting their act together and trying to do it. I believe BKS DG had a meeting yesterday or the day before yesterday with all the CEOs. But I believe it's still short. We need to bring in all these social media companies, bring them on and make them cooperate with us. I think a lot of steps need to be taken. The minister wants to change the law and tweak the law, I understand. But as per my, knowledge, there are adequate laws to deal with the punishments. I, for one, am not in favor of this flight ban and no-fly list. I think put them in jail. No-fly is a given, no-fly for life. Not 5 years, 2 years, 1 year. But I believe jail and,
But they're also mulling at, life imprisonment through this kind of a legislative action. So that's what you're also reiterating in a sense.
Well, actually, Christy, what I'd like to tell you is Section 3 of the Suppression of Unlawful Acts Against Aircraft 1982 prescribes life imprisonment already. Section 3 says anyone who makes a threat to an airport or an aircraft has to be put in jail for life. So that, that's what they should have looked at. The only difficulty here is they cannot identify whom to put in jail or whom to charge, for which you need, this is a cyber attack. Let's not, kid anybody, whether it comes through Twitter or whether it comes through Facebook or email or phone call. So you need to involve the relevant agencies. Otherwise, we're never going to get smarter. It could be the case, and I'll say this for the government, that, in the background, maybe all these agencies are working.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Russian strategic bombers patrol for 10 hours over the Sea of Japan. Performers walk through burning charcoal in a traditional fire walking ritual in China. And South Korea aims to elevate the shopping experience with a flying shopping cart. Finally, we are taking you back in history. On this day in 2008, India's lunar probe Chandrayaan-1 was launched. This was the country's first mission to the moon. Chandrayaan-1 discovered water molecules on the moon. And since then, India has launched 2 more lunar probes, with Chandrayaan-3 being the first mission to soft land on the lunar south pole. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Hello and welcome to the late night edition with me, Ayushman Singh Jamwal. Big breaking news coming in on the diplomatic front, where amid the BRICS Summit in Kazan in Russia, the Ministry of External Affairs has confirmed that Prime Minister Narendra Modi will have a bilateral meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping on Wednesday, which is tomorrow. The